Cedric Collins, founding attorney, Legacy One Law Firm, your trusted resource for all things living trust, estates, and probate. And today, I'm really excited about this conversation. As an estate planning attorney, one of the things I often see is that people think that they're prepared until life proves otherwise. So I've invited Ms. Jacalyn Williams, a life insurance specialist who approaches this very differently than most people in the industry. Folks, this isn't about pitches or products. It's about understanding how life insurance actually works in real life, including the things that most people don't find out until it's too late. So without further ado, Jacalyn, how are we doing today?
I'm doing fantastic. I am so glad to be here. I mean, this is one of my favorite topics. I love having conversations about, helping people to be better prepared, financially. So, I've been waiting to have this conversation with you for a minute. So I am very excited to be here. Thank you for inviting me.
You're quite welcome. We're delighted to have you. And so let's go ahead and jump right in. So, when most people hear life insurance, what do they immediately get wrong?
That's a great question. Most people think that life insurance is only for when you die. It's just to get somebody else paid out after death, right? And they never ever look at their policy again. And the truth is that most policies don't do what people think they do. A lot of people are either overpaying, they're getting less than what they need. And depending on the coverage, it may not last as long as they need it to last. And so when people understand that, then they realize that they really need to have a conversation.
Got it. So, with that in mind, what's the biggest wait, what moment that people have when they actually sit down and have a conversation with you about this?
They're shocked when they realize that life insurance can be used when they're actually alive. Most people think
Okay.
that it's only going to benefit their beneficiaries, right? And so they don't realize that you can use it for income protection, for illness, for even building wealth. Many people don't know that that's what it's used for. And so they tell me, why didn't anybody ever explain this to me before? And that's usually because most agents don't take the time to do so.
Got it. That makes a lot of sense. So, but looking at the big picture, why do some people think short term solutions are enough for lifelong problems?
Because usually people select the cheapest thing that's out there. They go for inexpensive, but they're not actually thinking about it for the long term. And at the end of the day, it's kind of like a band-aid. If, it's a short-term product is like a band-aid. It's not really it works until it doesn't. And so people assume that they'll just figure it out later. In other words, I'll already have something in place later on when I need something else. I don't know why they think that, but they do. Yeah,
Especially since, life isn't predictable, right?
right.
There's job changes, income changes. So why does flexibility matter so much when you're looking at something like life insurance as a financial tool?
Well, because your financial tools shouldn't trap you because we know that your life changes over time. You might get a new job, you might lose a job, you might suddenly be laid off, you might get sick, you might not be able to work. And so if your income could fluctuate, over the course of your life, you should have a financial plan that can accommodate those fluctuations.
That makes a lot of sense. And so why is it risky to assume that health insurance alone, has you covered? Because most people, they have these benefits on their job and they say, well, I'm good. I got this great benefits package. So why should we assume that maybe that health insurance might not quite be enough when a serious illness may occur?
Wow, that's a really great question because the health insurance pays the doctors in the hospital, it doesn't pay you. And so, what most people don't understand or don't realize is that most people who go bankrupt, they go bankrupt due to medical bills and health expenses. But it's not because 80% of those people who went bankrupt actually had health insurance coverage. So why would they go bankrupt? Because health insurance does not pay your lights, water, gas, doesn't pay your car note, doesn't pay your child's tuition, doesn't put food on your table. And so that's why people, they think that because I have health insurance that I'm good. But there's a lot of expenses that aren't covered by health insurance, like your day-to-day living experience.
And that makes a lot of sense. And I see that a lot in the world of estate planning, to where someone plans on leaving an inheritance, and next thing you know, a lot of those kind of end of life expenses kind of just eat away at what you plan, to leave, because these were all maybe unintended, consequences of not being, adequately insured or, prepared. And
Absolutely.
so, with that in mind, what kind of moments do you encounter where that make people say, "Hey, I wish I had known this sooner"?
That very point, exactly. Like if they've gone through a critical illness with a loved one, like, for example, my mom, had open heart surgery, and there's a lot of expenses that are not covered by health insurance. And if she had actually spoken with someone like me, who's an expert, a couple of years ago, um, she could have had a plan in place that would have covered all of those unexpected expenses. So when you see like GoFundMe's pop up, that's because they weren't prepared for the what ifs in life. And, it really is really better to kind of have these conversations before the need arises.
That makes a lot of sense. And sometimes it's with regard to these different financial products and things of that nature, there can sometimes be maybe some hidden benefits, like maybe a hidden, financial side to all of this. So with that in mind, what surprises people most about how life insurance can support them financially while they are yet alive?
Most people have no idea that life insurance is a multi-purpose financial tool. It can
Right.
be a safety net in the event that you get sick. It can also be a wealth building tool that actually has tax benefits, tax advantages to using life insurance products. It also it protects their income. If they're saving, let's say their 401k or their 403b or whatever that is, that can also be protected by a life insurance product to where it never loses value. And that's really important to someone as they get a little bit older and they can't afford to lose a dime of their hard-earned savings. We can use life insurance products to protect their hard-earned income.
That's really good to know, because most people, when they're thinking life insurance, you're exact. They're thinking just death. Someone's just going to get a big check when someone dies. So I think it's interesting that there's this benefit of, okay, wait a minute, I'm alive, and now this insurance policy is benefiting myself personally, my business, my family, in ways that we didn't really initially anticipate. So in my line of work, I do wills, trust, estate, and probate. There's a lot of myths out there in my line of work about how all this stuff really works. But in your line of work, what's the most common myth that stops people from even asking questions?
Hmm. They either think that it's too expensive. Most people are really shocked to find out how inexpensive it is. And then they think it's too complicated. A lot of agents think that what I do is very complicated when it's really not. Um, it's a tailor-made approach. We approach it looking at the client for what they need, and I mean that does take a skill, but it's not too complicated. So I have the time to sit down and actually design whatever it is the client wants, and it's definitely not complicated. In fact, it's a pleasure.
And so, speaking about that, sitting down and actually tailor making or tailor fitting your services, what is the difference between, working with someone who sells policies, versus someone who actually educates and informs potential clients?
There's a huge difference. A salesperson talks about products, but someone who wants to educate, you're never going to have that answer. I know I get asked that a lot, like especially when I have speaking engagements. People will come up to me and say, well, I need a policy, well, if I want to get $50,000 worth of coverage, how much is it going to cost? And it's like they think it's like a product on a shelf, where I just happen to know what the price
Yeah.
is, right? And my answer is always going to be, it depends. It really depends on what it is that you need it for. What is it designed to do for you? What is the outcome? Is it building wealth? Is it, just temporary, just to cover your mortgage? I mean, I have no idea. So that's usually what the issue is. Someone who's educating is going to take the time to actually ask you questions about what's important to you and what matters to you versus just selling you a product. And you come to me telling me, hey, I need $50,000 worth of life insurance. And I just say, okay, totally different. A salesperson just sells a product. An educator actually educates you on, to provide you with whatever options you need.
Jacalyn, I find that, quite fascinating because I share that same sentiment about educating and empowering. As you know, I come from the higher education space. And so what I say to many folks is there's no one size fits all cookie cutter approach to estate planning. And I imagine that's the same with, life insurance, right? So I imagine, you try to help this client kind of explore what their why is, right? Because I'll talk about that a lot speaking engagements. Hey, what is your why? So I'm pretty sure that's very much a part of your conversation when you're sitting down with a client who's inquiring with your services. And so,
Absolutely.
with that in mind, though, right? There's two camps a lot of times when I'm in a room. There's those who have a plan in place already, which I say kudos. There's people who don't have a plan at all. And so sometimes there's folks with plans in place that say, hey, I'm good. But a good review sometimes will uncover that maybe they're not as well off or protected as they think. So with that in mind, what does a good life insurance review conversation feel like or look like, one that has no pressure? What's that experience when you sit down and review a policy with someone?
It's usually pretty comfortable. I just look at, I mean, like, being an attorney, sometimes the legalese or the jargon that's used in that product or on that policy can be very misleading and or confusing to the consumer. And the number one thing is I just want to make them feel at ease with me because number one, I'm not trying to sell them anything. And if they have something that's amazing, I'm going to tell them so. I don't need to sell them
Right.
something. I mean, what would I look like trying to take something good away from you? So, that's number one, so I care whether, if they've got something good, I'm going to say so. But number two, I'm just going to break down the difference between what they think they have and what they actually have so they understand the difference. And then when they understand the difference, if they feel that they need to make a change, then we will pursue, we'll take a look at some of the options that they have at that point, because each situation is very different. So they usually say, wow, I didn't know there was a gap. And so then we find the tool that's going to close that gap.
Makes a lot of sense. So with that in mind, what do people usually say after their first genuine or kind of heart-to-heart conversation that they have with you?
Why didn't somebody explain this to me like this 20 years ago? And then they usually say, okay, can we schedule a follow-up because I need you to take a look at my actual plan.
Got it. And kind of our last question as we're kind of wrapping up here. If someone could spend 15 to 20 minutes kind of getting clarity, set up an approach that may cause confusion, why do you think most people don't? And why should they?
Because they think it's going to be stressful or salesy. They think that just meeting with someone who's like me, they think that I'm going to be trying to push them into one particular product or another, or I'm going to be in competition with their other financial advisors, when that's the opposite. At the end of the day, I want them to have something that complements the plan they already have. I want them to see that, just 15 minutes with me could actually empower them to actually achieve the goals that they originally set out to do. Oftentimes, just by that few minutes, they can gain a lot of clarity on their financial plan, and they'll be able to see if the tools that they currently have are going to get them to their destination or not. Or maybe there's going to be some additional tax consequences based on what they're currently doing. And I can make some suggestions on how they could alleviate that. But I definitely encourage, having a conversation with their attorney, with their estate attorney, with their tax preparer. I like to bring all of the advisors together so that we're all trying to achieve the same goal for that client's why. I'm not trying to compete with anybody else because that would not achieve their objectives. So, so if you need clarity, if once you get that clarity, you can make confident decisions.
Absolutely. Then once there's clear vision, there can be acceleration to that known goal, right? I love that, getting that clarity. And so how would someone get in contact with you to learn more about your services and how you might be a resource to them?
Well, I think we're going to post a slide or something that's going to give you that contact information, but you can definitely look me up on Instagram at Jacalyn White Williams. You can look at me on Facebook at Jacalyn Williams. You can look at my website, www.jacalynwilliams.com, and you can find all of my contact information there. But all you have to do is set a 15-minute appointment, and no pressure, just information, and I'll be happy to see what kind of information, how I can help you bring clarity to your financial portfolio.
Awesome. Amazing information. And I got a feeling that, guys, this is just the tip of the iceberg when you're talking with Jacalyn. So I want to encourage you, admonish you, please. As a trust and estates attorney, with what I do, I know that life insurance is that low-hanging fruit, if you will. But there's so many more advantages just from this call while one is alive that they can take advantage of. So please reach out to Jacalyn. And thank you so much, Jacalyn, for joining us today. That's all the time that we have. Please reach out. Remember, let's make those wise, prudent decisions as it comes to our family legacy, and get in contact and put together your team, whether it be, like Jacalyn said, your financial advisor, your life insurance professional, of course, yours truly, your estate attorney. Let us be a resource to you and your family legacy. Thank you for joining us.